Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the decline, the savage, brutal decline, if you will, of two once very prominent and respected and esteemed magazine mastheads. I remember these from, say, senior high school and college, those sort of days where being a history buff, one of these magazines is a history magazine, again, highly esteemed in its day. Only the history academics from the leading universities or people with something really novel to say would get a gig, and apparently it was, as I understand it, reasonably well paid back in the day. So if you made it as writing an article for this particular history magazine, then you knew you'd made it to the top. You were one of the players. As teenagers in their early 20s, we dreamed, like the college kids, we dreamed that one day we would write for such a magazine, and that would be an indication that we'd made it to the top, and all that sort of stuff. Now some of that's a bit starry-eyed kid, but it doesn't detract. If we wanted to know what was the final word on a matter of history, then we would refer to this magazine, and so that's the position it held, not only amongst us students, but also the academics of the day. But boy, how things have changed! What? So I don't recall. I actually have some old copies of the magazine, and there's not, cover to cover, there is not any indication of wokeness, of leftism, of the race politics, the hustling, race gender hustling. There's none of that. And by the way, every single contributor, the editor, the sub editors, the deputy editors, all this, it's all was all white men, who were the most accomplished academics, and they didn't allow race and politics, gender to get involved. They were very objective observers of history. They would produce analysis, but there wasn't this insane race hustling and so on you see today. Now, I don't recall a single article, certainly not in the magazines that I've kept. It was a very, very objective and very sober analysis and observation of history. But how have things changed? Now, I've got a recent one here, and firstly, there is not one single white male in the editorial staff anymore. There's a brown homosexual and an Asian homosexual, 4 women, two of whom are lesbian. That's now so not a single straight white male is on the editorial staff anymore of this once huge masthead. But let's have a look at the stories that they decide to cover. Are they looking at times in history and so on? So now they're looking at the first story is about an East European homosexual. The second story is about a painter from the 18th century who was believed to be, or we're claiming here, also homosexual. So 2 stories about homosexuals there. Then the evil doings of Christianity is the third story. The evil plots of white colonialists to oppress the black and brown people. And again, this is written by a Jewish lesbian. And so now there's an article here about they're talking about claims. They're rebutting claims. They're saying, well, history So there are some people who are claiming that history is, or history departments in universities have been taken over by leftist activists and so on. So they're rebutting that, saying no, that's not true. The fact that there's all this race and gender hustling and white people are evil and so on is just a new way of looking at history, and that's all it is. And also that because it's not equipment intensive, that these courses can be relatively cheap compared to some of the other courses, such as engineering, for example. So you can get like a diploma degree relatively cheaply, and then you can swan around, a student can swan around and say, look, I got a degree. But really it's the equivalent to an entry-level sociology degree. So they're arguing the reason there are more kids going into it is because it's cheaper to do. And the professor of history is again a female and a lesbian. So now then it moves on to the next article, again written by a Jewish writer, is about how women are being objectified and oppressed, and it stereotypes girls as being not able to do mathematics and engineering, which is really just the evil patriarchy at work. So we still actually haven't had a story about history here. All we've had is globalist woke bullshit propaganda. Here's the next one is again now another. This is a white male, but homosexual. We still haven't had one straight white male writing an article yet. This is about how again the evils of colonialism, evil, bad white man, colonial. What about the colonialism of the Persians or the Chinese around, the Han Chinese around there? What about all the other colonialisms in the world? No. That doesn't matter. Only white colonialism is bad. Now, here's one here from a brown woman who's not a lesbian, and she's written a story. She's delved through history to find black people who were in any way prominent in the 1800s England, to prove that black people were really big shaker movers in Britain and always had been. So there's a claim here that there's a black man that arrives from the Caribbean. He works as a labourer, and then suddenly he gets to university at a time when you had to come from the right schools to go to university or be exceptionally bright. So this is a black guy who's illiterate, by the way. He works as a labourer, and then suddenly he gets to university to study. What's he studying? Sociology of some sort back in the day. Oh no, it might have been theology. And then he becomes this incredibly powerful orator, and people go on their knees in front of him, this sort of thing. Why does he not have a statue in downtown London? Because he achieved great things. What did he achieve? I don't know. He's an illiterate Caribbean peasant who apparently is one of the greatest orators that ever. I'm sure. So the brown woman saying that this is and the fact that he hasn't been recognised just shows how racist and evil the white society is in Britain in this case. There's a coverage of books, some of the new history books that have come out, which are effectively all saying British Empire bad, British Empire bad, white people bad, British Empire bad, patriarchy bad. So those are the books there. I'm just looking through. This is a list of all their employment, all the people that work there, and I suppose 15% are male. Judging from the names, I'd say most of those are not white males. Anyway, again, how the evil English were oppressing the rest of the British Isles. That's really the Normans that they've jumped. When the William the Conqueror, 1066, when the Normans came to England, they were and took over the English crown as they did. They also had extensive territories in what today is France, especially around Normandy and the adjacent sort of provinces there. So the other French states were constantly trying to stir up trouble in Scotland and Wales and elsewhere to distract these guys. And so they thought, well, to end these distractions, we have to go and crush our enemy. So that was the cause of a lot of the wars there. It was the stirring and the jostling of what was the rather fluid and fractious boundaries of Europe. Then there's the British royal family is evil and bad. The evil East India Company oppressing the Indians. Evil man oppressing women. There was a lot of homosexuals really in the 1700s. They've just been hidden because of homophobia. Evil man oppressing women. How evil white men keep wars going just to make profits. There probably is some substance in that, but again, the piece is written to be very anti-male. It's not a history written by a Jewish guy, then going through a series of stories here showing how white men ripped off, the genius of black people. Again, even here's a story about a province of England back in the sort of the Middle Ages, and rather than just tell history, they turn it into an evil patriarchy story. Now, let me have a look here. Again, written by a lesbian activist here. Again, the activism isn't mentioned. She's put up as an independent expert in history. She's not. She's a fucking activist, but it's not stated there. If it was clearly stated, she was an activist. Here's a story about an event in Asia during the 1920s, and again, it's pitched that this event allowed the patriarchy to take over, the evil right-wing patriarchy. Again, it's not a commentary on history. Why can't they just independently report and talk about history? There's a story here about globalization has always been with us, and anyone who opposes globalization is a right-wing Nazi. That's there. Then there's a talk about how this idea that there was anything good about any white empire, particularly the British colonial empire. This idea that the English or any European colonial did anything good, anything at all, nothing was good. And again, this is a story written by a lesbian activist, but again, they don't say that she's an activist. Then now here's a story about another black. This is a black lady who was allegedly in the 1950s in Britain, who was allegedly made a school principal, and she was held back and cruelly oppressed, evilly oppressed by those white racists who made her a principal of a school. Excuse me. And the two don't. How could she be evilly and cruelly oppressed, victim of evil racism, and also be made a school principal, which was a coveted prestigious job at the time. How is that even possible? That's not explained. We're just supposed to. Then how evil how evil white Europeans are to Jews, Gentiles, and so on. So, here's another story about how women warriors are the forgotten. The idea of women warriors won't be allowed because of the patriarchy, evil patriarchy. But really, there were these powerful, strong, I don't need no man women throughout history, and they were better than men, 10 times better, 100 times better. And if there was a fight with swords or anything like that, these women would have killed 1,000 men with their bare hands without even breaking a sweat. This is what they call history. Oh, fuck. Now, yet another story about a black man who in I think it was somewhere in France, was in the 1950s. He was a genius upon a genius upon a genius. Was born an illiterate peasant, but he was a fucking genius. Then they've got a story about how he was killed by some alleged. I don't think the people were ever found, alleged by some white guy. It must be a group of white Nazi thugs did it, right wing, the far right. And then they go through some other alleged murders here. They don't mention that there are 3 murders of white people murdering black people here. What they don't mention is those are the only 3 murders of white people killing black people that have occurred in 65 years. Over that same time, there were many, many, many more killings of black people killing white people. That's not mentioned here. You'd assume from reading this article here that only black people are being killed, and there are so many Nazis running around that wow, you trip over them. You can't even walk around the block without tripping over a few hundred of them. More articles about how black people are being oppressed and so on and so forth. And capitalism is evil, and so on and so forth. So here we get another yet another story about a black guy here who was the best footballer in the whole universe in the early 1900s. But again, he was oppressed by those evil white people. Now, that's what the history magazines become. It is wall-to-wall fucking propaganda, some very cherry-picked stories, and an absurd position that's being taken by a bunch of activists. But that's what's there. Now, the next one is, this is more prominent internationally. This was huge back in its day and renowned for stunning photography, which, by the way, to a large extent, I think it's kept, the photography. But this used to be, again, I've got older copies here. This used to be the premier magazine in its class. Again, something that as a college kid, I dreamed of one day I'd write an article for it. I was in that level. But let's have a look at the 5 sort of top editorial people here. Again, a black lesbian, a Asian homosexual, a Mexican homosexual, a white homosexual, and an Islamic guy who doesn't look homosexual. I don't know. So those are the things. Again, not a single straight white male in the group. Starts off with some pretty good photography, but even talking about, so there's a small creature, mainly animals and stuff, but there's a small creature that's been discovered or found, and but like black people being oppressed by evil white Nazis, this creature struggles as well. So that's straight away infecting the article with left-wing woke nonsense. It's just nothing more than a propaganda delivery system. That's all it is. It's become that. And they're talking about a book that talks about all the creatures that have been made extinct, written by a Jewish guy. And again, it's those evil white Nazi fascist capitalists that are doing it. And I'm not even going to bother to go through this. There's no again, you know, the focus on like the biography is about a black guy, again, being oppressed by white, victim of racism and so on. There's injured animals injured by evil white Nazis. The list goes on and on here. I mean, there's, again, the photography is pretty good, but there's not a story in here that doesn't have some sort of racial gender element woven into it. And if there isn't one, that they just gin one up. You know, Native Americans being oppressed, black people being oppressed, everyone other than whites being oppressed, more black people being oppressed, yet more black people being oppressed, and on it goes. And white people are all evil and have no redeeming feature according to that. So again, a propaganda delivery system. That's what happened. That's what's happened to these magazines. I mean, how far can you go down? Now, I appreciate that, you know, the magazine world's changing online and all this sort of stuff. I do get that. And I get that they were paying quite generous fees to contributors back in the day. Now it's become really an honorarium to contribute an article. So they've got to reduce their costs very substantially and so on, because the circulation is you know, a tenth of what it once was, which is a reflection of the quality, but also a reflection of the changing nature of information delivery. The fact they've decided to turn it, keep it going when I don't think economically it can survive, you know, on its own 2 feet. The fact they've decided to turn it into a propaganda delivery system for, you know, hysterical leftists says everything, because I think it's the overall story of what's happening to the West and our decline. You've been fantastic today at your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.